Good evening, welcome to 60 Minutes, and welcome to London. I'm Tom Steinfort. It's not often a 74-year-old takes on a new job, but such is the lot of King Charles III. The new monarch has officially been crowned, and now the near impossible task of filling his mother's shoes begins. Polling has shown that not only was Queen Elizabeth immensely more popular than Charles, so too is his son William, his sister Anne, and even his grandkids. But it's not just here in the UK that the new king needs to win people over. In Australia, the R word, republic, is being uttered once again. Tonight, though, those closest to His Majesty want the world to know why he and Queen Camilla will succeed. A moment in history. King Charles III, accompanied by Queen Camilla, emerging onto the famed balcony of Buckingham Palace.
Getting a moment that will stay with them for the rest of their lives. And
This is the dawning of a new era. Those opulent crowns, heavy not just with precious gemstones, but also the extraordinary weight of expectation. Under typically miserable London skies, the traditional flyover had to be scaled back to a bare minimum. Prince Louis's wave appropriately looking more like windscreen wipers as the slimmed-down royal family watched on.
thousands of people who have braved the rain and are here to witness an historic moment.
But King Charles would have liked what he saw, his loyal subjects braving the conditions en masse, coming out in huge numbers, a crowd even his much-loved late mother would have been proud of.
I think there was definitely a huge outpouring there and love. Because I've always thought about Charles that he's quite popular, and I've always thought he would be a better king than people gave him credit for. It's not the Queen. It's not the same thing, but it never would be. Who could live up to that?
Valentine, I feel woefully underdressed.
Tom, nice to meet you.
You look glorious in the morning suit. Come on in.
Thank you.
Valentine Lowe, the royal correspondent for the Times newspaper, was inside Westminster Abbey and lucky enough to see every remarkable moment up close. It is pretty extraordinary to see these great traditions that have lived so long.
The basis of the coronation ceremony goes back over 1,000 years, and you just felt you were just part of history. It is pretty fantastic. The music was fantastic. I mean, the bling. I mean, just the robes that the king wore were just stupendous, and it was a good show.
The service was steeped in tradition, but also with a nod to the changing face of modern Britain. Perhaps the most eye-catching of arrivals was the new heir to the throne, the Prince and Princess of Wales, along with their 3 children. Young George also watching his own future play out before him. Kate and Charlotte were radiant in matching Alexander McQueen gowns and seemed to revel in the occasion.
I, William, Prince of Wales, pledge my loyalty to you, and faith and truth I will bear unto you, as your liege man of life and limb. So help me God.
But it was William involved in perhaps one of the most iconic and heartfelt moments of the day, swearing allegiance to his father and sealing it with a kiss. It's a very serious traditional service, but I think we got pretty close to some real emotion and real affection there when we saw William approach his father.
Yes, I think that's right. I mean, they've had their moments, they've had their ups and downs, but I think that speaks to the fondness, the genuine fondness between the two of them.
The most reverent part of the ceremony saw the king dramatically disrobed and taken behind decorative screens to be anointed with holy oil, a tradition deemed too sacred to be broadcast. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The St Edward's crown, encrusted with 444 rare gemstones and weighing more than 2 kilos, adorned with great precision on the head of King Charles III.
God save the King!
Was this destiny fulfilled?
Yeah, this is him fulfilling his destiny, a destiny he's waited for a very long time.
Unlike most of us watching a coronation for the first time, Charles had seen it all before when his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, was crowned in 1953. Looking back, it's striking just how young the new monarch was at 25 years of age. And even younger still was her son, only 4 years old. This time around, he's 74, the oldest sovereign to ever take the throne. Yet it might be a 5-year-old that many people remember from the occasion. Prince Louis yawns and waves, causing a sensation for royal watchers.
Prince Louis is enjoying this, I think.
This is the biggest day of King Charles's life. After 7 decades as heir to the throne, now finally he is front and centre. But there were just as many headlines about the members of the royal family who are today pushed to the sidelines.
The dark cloud that's always lurking on the horizon. What's going to happen about his family relations? What's going to happen about Harry?
After months of speculation about whether Prince Harry would even bother attending, he arrived at his father's coronation alone, without his wife Meghan and their children, who decided to stay home in America. Relegated to the third row, Harry's view was, at times, obstructed by a feather. And while the heir and his family left the Abbey in a magnificent horse-drawn carriage, the spare did a runner, all by himself in a black BMW, straight to the airport.
He was out on a limb, I thought, and it just spoke volumes, the fact that no sooner did he leave the service than he was in a car and off to Heathrow to fly home. And it just underlines what I think most of us have long believed anyway, that we're still a long way off for there being any outbreak of peace in the very fractured relationship between Harry and his father and his brother.
It's almost sad to watch.
Yeah, no, it's heartbreaking to watch. I mean, because of course Harry, although he's been quite annoying quite often, he also has a huge amount to offer. And the same is true of Meghan. And I thought she might have been the woman to do that, but instead she cut and run, and I think it's a great shame.
Also barred from the iconic balcony display was Prince Andrew, frozen out of the family following his friendship with pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. With no role in the ceremony, Andrew watched his brother become king and Camilla crowned queen from the far edge of the third row. What do you think goes through Andrew's head when he's sitting there watching it all? His brother's becoming king and, his sister gets a very prominent role and yet he's cast aside.
I think I would hate to speculate what goes through Andrew's brain, because I think often not much. He's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. He's a man full of delusion.
The delusion being that this will all blow over.
That it will blow over and he can come back. And that people might want him and that he might have a role to play. He doesn't have a role to play.
But there was a humble violinist from Sydney entrusted with a very important role on the day. Madeleine Easton had the honour of being the only Australian asked to perform at the coronation, packing her bags for London for the biggest show of her life.
It's unbelievable, because we haven't had a coronation in 70 years, have we? And so this is the first one in most people's living memory. For me, little old me from Sydney, to be a part of that, it's really hitting home now. And it's getting more and more staggering. Yeah.
Madeleine does have experience on her side when it comes to entertaining the royal family. The virtuoso is a member of the Baroque soloists and Monteverdi choir, which King Charles is not just the patron of, but also a huge fan. He pretty much has them on speed dial. What's it like playing for the royals?
Oh, they're great. They're wonderful. I've played for King Charles many times, and we used to get invited to St James Palace to play for his dinner parties.
If I have people over at my house, I'll put on a Spotify playlist, but he can call you up and put on a big show.
Well, he likes live music. I don't know if you know this, but King Charles is one of the biggest classical music fans that there is. He really cares about it. He needs it in his life. He said to us once at Buckingham Palace, classical music keeps me sane. He said it calms me and it grounds me, and he needs it in his life.
So you're key to the king's sanity?
Apparently so. Oh my gosh, I never thought of it. That's clearly not true. But hey, for 1 minute, I'll let myself think that.
Beautiful music, perfect soundtrack to a day the king will never forget, and neither will Madeline.
I think I've had one of the best days of my life. I mean, how do you top this?
It sounds like you're floating.
Yeah, I just didn't want it to end. I was like, oh my God, there's that person. Oh my God, there's that person. There's Joanna Lumley. You know, there's Emma Thompson. There's Stephen Fry. Oh my God, there's Boris Johnson. It's almost like the music was so good, it transcended the occasion itself. And I just thought, man, I am proud to be here.
With Madeline's job done, it's now time for Charles and Camilla to get to work. So what exactly can we expect from our new king and queen?
Nobody in the history of the British monarchy has come to the throne better prepared.
It was absolutely a privilege to be part of history and of something which only comes along once in a generation. It's a huge moment for anyone who's going to play a part in it.
When King Charles calls, Scott Fessenden Wood answers. And really, who in their right mind could refuse an invite as glorious as this one?
It's a bit pinch yourself moment.
It is a bit pinch yourself moment, absolutely. I told my dad about it, and he has a memory of watching the coronation on the tiny screen of a rented television, the only television set in his street when he was growing up. Crowding into a room to catch a glimpse. I don't think he ever expected that his son one day would be in Westminster Abbey for a coronation.
Scott represents the King as Britain's High Commissioner Designate to Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. But prior to that, the pair was almost inseparable, having spent 4 years travelling the world together when Scott was Charles's Deputy Private Secretary.
Am I allowed to borrow one or two things?
We can do this now.
Okay.
On every royal tour from 2017 to 2021, you'll see Scott hovering in the background, never too far from his boss's side, there to sort out any issue, no matter how big or small.
Is there anything that jumps out at you that kind of paints a picture of the kind of man Charles is?
My mum got very sick. She had cancer, and it all ended very quickly in the end. But he'd never met my mum. He had no idea who she was. But he took time, without me knowing, to send her a very long and incredibly thoughtful handwritten letter, which arrived in the hospital with a big bouquet of flowers, just saying how very sorry he was to hear that she was so unwell, and to say that he hoped she would find some comfort in those last few days in her pride in me and the rest of my family. But it's just one small example of the sort of thing that he would do time and again.
Yeah, so for so many people in the public, they see that stony face of the royals, but you've seen the big heart.
I think that's right, because that's just who he is. It's not an act. It's not something he puts on for the cameras or for the audience. It's just who he is. And I think he believes that for the monarchy to endure and to be relevant in people's lives, that connection is really important.
You eat your vegetables.
He's a workaholic. I mean, he's literally a workaholic. I remember the Queen taking me into his study once to talk about some charitable venture, and the desk was piled high with papers. We couldn't see him anywhere. And eventually, a head popped up. He was there, but surrounded by so much paperwork.
As a long-time friend of Charles's parents, Giles Brandreth has had many an afternoon tea with the royal family.
But unlike a true Brit, I'm not having any milk.
He says the new king and queen are just infatuated with each other. Interestingly, in a way, Elizabeth and Philip were not.
Duke Veteran once said to me, love consists not necessarily in gazing into one another's eyes, but looking in the same direction. But what you get with Charles and Camilla are a couple who do look into one another's eyes, but also are looking in the same direction. They have common values.
So Camilla's almost the yin to Charles's yang.
I think they probably like all that. I'm not quite sure what that means. So I'm not going to agree with it in case it's something a little bit unsuitable. But they do.
Beautifully.
They do complement each other. They work tremendously well as a team.
Giles believes Charles is trying to position himself as a man in touch with the plight of the everyday person, typified by his choice to have a comparatively modest coronation, if you can call it that.
Was there some
Yes.
significance to the
Yes.
fact that this was, I guess, a pared back
Yes.
celebration?
2023 has been very different from 1953. This time it was curtailed, I think partly because the king was sensitive to times being tough, a cost of living crisis, not a time for extravagance. And I think there was a bit of a tension between us, the people, saying, give us the spectacle. We want people in bearskins. We want marching bands. We want all that. And the king saying, let's not spend too much money.
Thrifty king.
A thrifty king. A thrifty king. And thrifty with the guest list. I felt very honoured to be invited because there were only 2,200 people invited this time, whereas last time there were 8,200 people. So a quarter of the number of people. This is history that passes before us.
Giles has no doubt the biggest challenge ahead for King Charles is staying relevant, a task not made any easier by the fact he's the oldest monarch to ever be crowned.
He's going to be 75 in November. But because he comes from a long-lived family, his mother lived to 96, his father to 99, his grandmother to 101, he could well be king for 25 years. I think at this time in the story of the world, to have a steady, older person as the head of state is quite comforting.
But it's funny when you put it like that, who starts a new career at 74?
Yeah. And you've got to make it work. The reason I think it will work and does work is because we know enough about King Charles to be, confident. Nobody in the history of the British monarchy has come to the throne better prepared.
You can always find a Prince of Wales pub wherever you go.
Scott Fessenden Wood was a right-hand man for Charles when he was the Prince of Wales and agrees the king has been training all his life for this moment.
It'd be great to be in that ancient abbey for that.
He's proud to have played a small part in the making of the man who's become His Majesty.
Well, what does it mean for you that your old boss is now your king?
It means a lot, actually. It means a lot because I was very proud to work for him for those 4 years. No one in my family had ever done anything like this before me. My dad was a driver. My mum cleaned other people's houses when I was growing up. I sort of stumbled into this by an indirect route. So to be in the Abbey, to watch him being crowned king, really quite an extraordinary thing.
But not everyone is celebrating the new king. In fact, in Australia, is the monarchy about to be dethroned?
The Republican movement has had to kind of play the long game on this one. But do you feel like the next few years is the time to move?
I feel like tomorrow is the time to move.
Tens of thousands of people lined London's streets, even in the pouring rain, just to catch a glimpse of the coronation. Most of them were celebrating our new king and queen, but some turned up purely in protest. It shows even on the monarchy's best day, loads of people still want to get rid of it, especially in Australia.
I think the way that Australia is looking at the crown in its entirety is very different to during all of Elizabeth's reign, because there is a movement within so much of the Commonwealth, which is having it now. It's really, open slather, if you like, and everyone can question the crown in a very different way. I'm excited to see how Australia responds to it.
Let's talk about Australia becoming a republic.
Craig Foster is the new co-chair of the Australian Republican movement, pushing to scrap the monarchy.
Foster tried to take the shot on his own little ship.
He proudly captained Australia for the Socceroos and now is standing up again, believing the leader of our country should be one of us.
You've got a lot of passion for our country. Could you be our head of state?
Listen, this is enough. This is enough for me.
Because I was thinking, it's quite a step from King Charles to President Craig. Now, Craig's a good Australian name.
Well, you know what? So is Ashraf, and Hakim, and Mustafa.
This is the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah.
You think that it's got to be an Australian face that is the face of Australia.
Exactly. And 50 years ago, that face looked like mine. In 2023, it doesn't have to. It doesn't in federal parliament anymore. It doesn't in our institutions. It doesn't in business. It doesn't in sport. And it shouldn't at the head of the state.
It's 24 years since Australia went to a referendum.
One for Australia.
To decide if we would become a republic and choose our own head of state.
Australia will not become a republic on the 1st of January 2001.
In the end, the No campaign won with 54.9% of the vote. Republicans claiming in defeat that the majority of Australians did want to ditch the monarchy, but just couldn't agree on the best model to elect a president.
The point of the matter is about committing finally to this last step of maturation of any former colony, and that is standing completely on our own and being represented by ourselves.
For Craig, it's a no-brainer. Australia should be governed by Australians, not some foreign overlords that landed here in Botany Bay a couple of hundred years ago.
And in fact, it's just the natural journey of Australia.
He wants another referendum in the next 5 years and claims this time around it will succeed.
Do you think enough people care about this? Because, whoever our head of state is isn't going to fix the cost of living crisis. It's not going to sort out the potholes on someone's street.
Yeah.
There is a sense out there of who gives us stuff who our head of state is.
Yeah. That's a really great question. So perhaps you should ask that to all the First Nations leaders who are talking about what colonisation means to them. Perhaps we should talk to the multicultural communities who might say that, well, we've been here for decades and decades and decades, but we're still not represented in all the institutions across the country. And so it is important to big sections of Australia. It's incredibly important. It's also incredibly important to many of us who believe that we have to stand for something, both here and on the international stage.
Of course, saying goodbye to any long-term relationship, it would be a wrench and there would be sadness.
As a long-standing friend of the royal family, it's no surprise Giles Brandreth loves the Crown.
Is it Charles Street?
It's appropriate, isn't it?
Giles believes that sometimes it's a case of better the devil you know. But he says if Australia did choose to become a republic, the King would still want to retain the close bond between our countries. It'll always come with being part of the Commonwealth.
I'm not saying they're looking forward to it if it happens, but I'm saying that their view, they are there to serve. If people in Australia feel having King Charles as the head of state has some value, is attractive, let's keep going with it. And I love the idea of you having our king as a shared bond between us. But if you don't fancy it, Tom, we're easy about that. We can take it.
You're big enough and strong enough.
We're big enough and strong enough. If I were you, I'd hang on in there. And you may find, when you get the substitute, you may think, oh, they were quite, no, they actually were ready. He was a decent guy, and that Camilla, she really was. And William and Catherine, and the law, and the George and Louis, they're also loved. Oh, we've lost them. We don't have them anymore. You may miss them. But I'm sure they'll still come visiting because they love the Commonwealth and they love Australia.
Hello, I'm Tom Steinfort. Thank you for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minutes segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes, which are on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.